The 6 to 7 Figure Show, episode 119. Let's hit it.
Broadcasting from the Valley of the Sun outside Phoenix, Arizona, this is the 6 to 7 Figure Show. Tired of working so hard and having no time? Take your six-figure practice and turn it to a thriving seven-figure enterprise. And now, your host, author, speaker, mentor, and strategist, Frank Bria.
Hey everyone, welcome to the 6 to 7 Figure Show. I'm your host, Frank Bria. In today's episode, we are going to focus on financial freedom. But first, a quick message from our sponsor. This episode of the 6 to 7 Figure Show is brought to you by a high-ticket program. Any service business owner that's looking to reach seven figures suffers from the same problems. When you start the journey, you are on your own, managing tasks, maybe a few team members. But as a seven-figure business, now you need a team that's executing for you day in and day out. But somewhere along the way, you're going to have to hire, manage, and train every single one of these team members, even if you've never done this work yourself. And if you don't manage scale and growth at the same time, you'll end up either crashing under the weight of new customers or building an expensive infrastructure you cannot afford to keep operating. So if you want to avoid these problems and get past seven figures, then let's talk. Let me map out a plan for you of pain-free growth. I'd like to speak with you personally and tailor the plan for you. So text HTP to 602-698-7575. That is my direct line. The message will come to me and I will get back with you to schedule a time so we can finally achieve seven figures in your business. That's HTP to 602-698-7575. All right, I am pleased to introduce today's guest. This is a good friend of mine, Josh Patrick. He is obsessed with what makes a business economically and personally sustainable. He's the author of Sustainable, a fable about creating a personally and economically sustainable business. He lives in Vermont, where he writes a blog, has a podcast, does a weekly video on what it takes to create a business that you live, and one that is always sale ready. Josh, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Frank. It was great seeing you. It's always great talking with you. I always have fun having these chats.
Yeah, we almost didn't start this recording. We were talking for about an hour before we got going here.
And we won't tell about the time we got separated at dinner either.
Oh goodness, yeah. But let's not talk about that. Actually, yes, we were separated. Anyway, so let's talk about. Let's give a little context on what you do and the kinds of clients you work with, just so people can get aware of your background.
Sure. My specialty is working with blue-collar businesses. That's where I came from. I owned a food service and vending company. We went from a half employee to 90 employees over a 20-year period. Sold that business, went into the wealth management world where I still am. But all my clients ended up owning businesses. And, so I started working on projects about how do you become financially free from your business, which is a problem for most folks, because if I ask a blue-collar business owner what the retirement plan is, they point to the business and say, that's my retirement plan. And I have to sit there and say, well, that's a pretty crummy retirement plan because it's only going to cover 20% of your costs.
Yeah.
And so I've come up with a whole bunch of programs that we have that basically work on what a small private business needs to do to become economically and personally sustainable and successful, which means that you can afford to leave your business when you want to, who you want, in the way you want. Yeah. And the thing that we really like to focus on, this is especially true with your audience, is there are so many misconceptions that business owners bring to the party about what financial freedom is and how to achieve it.
For sure. Yeah.
And I know that you work in that area specifically. I mean, going from a 6 to a 7 figure business, there's some major changes that have to come in there. And, one of the biggest problems that your people have, and it's the same thing with my clientele, is that learning how to be an effective delegator is a huge and almost insurmountable issue, because very few business owners ever figure out how to do it well.
Yeah, I think that that's absolutely true. One of the things, again, misconceptions that people have is either it's kind of like they go to the extremes, either they kind of let their hands off the handlebars too quickly, and then everything spins out of control. I'm kind of that way. I tell everyone who works for me, I'm not a micromanager. I'm really bad at this. I'm probably going to make you feel like you're more alone. Then you're going to have to come get me if, if there's an issue, don't worry about it. But yeah, it's like, let go of the handlebars, or they just refuse to let go because they don't know how, when they don't trust people. So much personal growth stuff that has to go on to figure out how to delegate effectively. Otherwise, I think you do end up in one of those extreme camps.
Well, you hit on one of the issues that people have all the time is a lack of trust.
Yeah.
And there's a great book by Charles Green and Mazur called the Trust Equation. And the trust equation is a really good thing to be looking at, which is competence plus caring about the other person plus doing what you said you do divided by self-interest will tell you how much you're going to trust somebody.
Wow, that's interesting.
And it sits true about 100% of the time that I found. Huh. And where the issue comes in that particular thing is in the competence level.
Yeah.
Is that when you first delegate, the person you're delegating to may not be as competent as they need to be. So as a result, you don't trust them.
Right.
Now, the other thing which you mentioned also is that you either abdicate or you micromanage.
Yeah.
And you have to find a balance for that. And I find that's because if you're abdicating, you probably have a pretty good tolerance for mistakes that others make. I see people abdicating when they first start delegating, not because they have a lot of trust in the person, it's because they're too lazy to go back and check on the work.
Yeah. Yeah. Or they're like, hey, it's your problem now. Like, I gave it to you. Like, I trust you're going to get stuff done, but they sort of misunderstand the role that they play in that equation.
Right. My first mentor had a great little methodology of managing a business. He called it EIA, which stands for expect, inspect, accept. So I set an expectation and I delegate that expectation.
Yeah.
Now, if I don't go back and inspect, I can pretty much guarantee that when I finally get around to going back and looking, I'm not going to be especially happy with what I'm getting.
Right.
There's a methodology I teach blue collar, especially contractors, a lot called Scrum, which is used to develop software essentially. Mm-hmm. It's a really good.
Now it's like everywhere in lots of project stuff.
Well, in my opinion, if you have a relatively small team and you're doing projects, using Scrum for doing that is a really good way of doing that. Now, one of the good things about Scrum is that you have a daily huddle to check on how things are going. To 5-minute meeting in the morning. And at the end of the sprint, which is a 2 or 3 week period, you do what's called a retrospective. And the retrospective is where you go back and you look at what you had just done over the last couple of weeks. And you start making adjustments on how you can increase the velocity, but it also gives you a chance to make sure your project has not spun out of control.
Right. Yeah.
So,
and that's a really important thing, because I think a lot of times we've got this vision for where we want our team to be doing stuff, but frankly, we're kind of building in the dark. Well, a lot of what my clients deal with is they want to grow, but they've actually never been there themselves, so they don't really know this road. So they're kind of, it's like the headlights only go so far down the road. And so you can only take a couple of steps before you have to sort of reassess and do it again. And if you're absolutely right, if you leave too much time in between these reassessment timeframes, that you're going to go off track and you won't even know it till it's too late.
Yeah. So I call it delegation an art. I don't think it's a science. I think there's a bit of science in it, but I think there's a lot more art than there is science. Yeah. And it has to be, and it really comes down to, do you have a high tolerance for people making mistakes? And I have two statements by Buckminster Fuller, who's one of my philosophical heroes in the world. One is, you don't learn less. And the second is, mistakes are learning opportunities.
Yeah.
And I ask people all the time, I ask business owners, I say, well, I can't let my people make mistakes because blah, 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 blah. And I say, okay, let's talk about how you learn to ride a bike.
Yeah.
And which is, or learn how to ski or learn how to do anything. Did you do it right the first time? And if you did it right the first time, I can promise you it was pure luck.
Yeah, right.
I tell my, when I first started my business, the worst thing that ever could happen to a 24-year-old in business happened to me. Do you know what that was?
You were successful your first
yes.
time out.
Yes. I was really, really successful for the first 2 years. And being 24 years old, I thought it was because of my great, fantastic management
Yeah,
skills.
exactly.
And then reality set in.
Yeah. See, I was lucky. My first company I started, we crashed it into the ground. We had to lay everybody off overnight, and we had to carry the furniture out of the office over at midnight so that we didn't get it all locked in. So failed miserably the very first time. So it was good learning. Actually, I've probably told the story to you before, and I think the podcast listeners have heard it too. I had a conversation with a venture capitalist as we were looking to fund one of the software companies that I helped start, and it was $6 million we were asking for them. And we had just come off an exit. So that makes it way easier, because they're all happy, they're ready to go again. But I felt like, because I was stepping into co-founder role in this, I felt like I needed to kind of level with them and say, listen, this exit was great, but I've had stuff happen, other companies we've taken to the ground. I feel like you need to know. And it was really fascinating when this guy said to me, he said, good. We want people who have failed, because honestly, the ones who get it right first time out of the chute, they think they're God. They don't listen to anybody. They never take advice. What can happen if you get this wrong, and it's just enough to make sure you come back for good advice. So it was really a fascinating take.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing you got to remember about mistakes is that the mistakes our employees are going to make, they'd have to really try to make a mistake big enough to put you out of business.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Most of the mistakes they make are relatively minor mistakes, and we go crazy over these mistakes and yell at them and demean them. And there's no reason for that, because frankly, at the most, it costs you a few $100 as a rule.
Yeah. Yeah. And even when they're big ones, I had an employee one time drop an entire client's database, not back it up and archive it, literally drop it with no backup. That was bad. That was seriously a black eye, and it cost us a lot of time and energy, but it wasn't the end of the world. We came back and, we apologized to the client, and she's, and she's a friend of mine to this day, 15 years later. But I do think we tend to over penalize these kinds of mistakes, because frankly, we wouldn't do it to ourselves. If we made those kinds of mistakes ourselves, we'd just go, okay, well, we're going to push through it and figure it out.
Right. Well, we might beat ourselves up for 5 or 10 minutes, and then we're going to go back and go to work.
Yeah.
And
but it's yeah.
Right. And the other issue which I find a lot, and this was my problem when I was a young manager, was that I rarely took personal responsibility for what happened around me. If there was something that went wrong, it was always someone else's fault, or I would justify what happened.
Yeah.
And it's really important when you start to learn to delegate is you have to become what I call super responsible, where you take responsibility for everything that happens in your business, whether it was your fault or not. And it's a much better place to manage from than trying to do this sort of thing where, you're blaming somebody else, you're justifying how it is. Nobody wants to work for somebody like that.
No, definitely not. I remember along those lines, someone who modeled that for me really well early in my career. I worked for a small boutique consulting firm in the financial planning space, and they taught me everything I know about consulting. And the president of that company was one of the best guys ever. I was involved in a project as a brand new employee. I think I'd been there maybe 3 or 4 months. We did a statement project for a company, a Fortune 500 company, produced retirement statements for all of their employees, calculating pension balances and everything. We got it wrong. We did the calculations wrong. They went out to everybody totally wrong. That was a big fiasco, right? And I was the one who made the calculation error, and I was 3 months on the job. So, I could say, well, it's not my fault because I didn't really know what I was doing. And the person who was managing me, didn't really check because they thought I was, had it handled. And so, he, could have been his fault, and everyone else who double checked stuff all the way through the process. But everyone took responsibility. And I remember walking into the president's office and saying, listen, it's my fault. I'm the one who made the calculation error. I got a master's degree in math. I should have done better. And he said, you know what? I'm so glad we're in an environment where everybody's taking their own blame. It's sure better than the other way around, And it was a pain, and we had to fix it. And it was embarrassing and everything. But again, they didn't go out of business. We were fine. They didn't lose the client. But man, it was one of the best places I ever, did consulting work. They taught me a lot. And that really just comes down to the maturity level of the manager.
Yeah. I mean, the truth is, if you're going to own your own business, own your own business.
I love that. That's great.
You know?
So I want to talk about this issue of like getting ready for sale or exit, because a lot of people talk about it, but I think a lot of people, it like goes over their heads. So I want to ask you, like, when's the right time to think about this? Because there's probably a lot of people who are listening right now who are like, exit process, like I can barely get clients right now. Like, so it just sort of like blows over them. When's the right time to start thinking about this stuff?
I would say as soon as you can, well, you should start thinking about it from the day you start your business. Not about exiting, but about having the financial ability to do what you want when you want.
Right.
So
it goes back to the financial freedom concept.
Yeah, you're probably not going to want to exit your business, but you do want to create enough. I mean, I call it the 4 areas of profit. And the 4 areas are having a great lifestyle, having an emergency fund for at least 6 months, because you're going to have downs in your business. And if you don't have capital sitting around, you're going to go out of business.
Yeah.
You have to have enough money to have a fully funded growth program, because growth is not just receivables. It's also, I've got to hire people, and you probably have to hire people before you really need them. So that's an expense. Yeah. And the 4th area is a fully funded retirement program. Now, with your clientele, the people you work with, they have some really good options. In fact, with the people that you're working with, the question I would be asking them is not, here's what you can do. I would ask them, if there are no rules, none, how much do you want to put in your retirement plan a year?
Yeah.
Because we can structure plans, depending on your age, where you get up to $300,000 a year to put in your plan.
Oh, wow. I think people would be like, wait a minute, my IRA limit's not.
Yeah, well, that's because they don't know what they're doing.
I know,
when I teach classes to other financial advisors about how working with private business owners, I say, look, most businesses in this country are less than 25 employees.
Yeah.
As a result, they're not going to sell their business and ride off into the sunset. Because even if they have 3 employees, they're probably living on $100,000 to $200,000 a year.
Yeah, right.
And to get $100,000 to $200,000 a year, you need to have $3 or $4 million sitting around. Mm-hmm. So you can do that if a retirement plan funded to $2 or $3 million is part of your plan. Now, I call that pre-funding your retirement.
Yeah.
So if I start when I'm 30, I'm only putting away $35,000, $40,000 a year.
Yeah, it's way easier, sure.
Right. If I start when I'm 50, I need to put away a couple $100,000 a year.
Right.
So hopefully by the time you're 50, you're creating enough excess cash where you can afford to do that. And what I do, I call that pre-funding my retirement. Mm-hmm. In other words, the truth is, if I buy your business, if I was buying your business, Frank, I would be taking the cash flow you created to pay for your business.
Yeah, right.
Well, if I do that before I retire, I'm taking the cash flow I create to fund my retirement when I decide to stop working. And it gives me a great opportunity. Now, the thing with, your type of people that you're working with, they don't really have a saleable business. They need a different strategy about how to leave their business.
Yeah, completely.
So at the end of the time, when they say, okay, I want to start slowing down, you do what's called the 80-20 rule on your book of business. Because if you take a look at your book of business, what happens is 80% of your revenue comes from 20% of your customers.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So if I fire 80% of my customers, I've just gone from working 5 days a week or 6 days a week or 7 days a week down to 1 or 2 days a week. Right. And I could probably structure so I work 1 week a month. Well, most people I know who are in the professional services world of some sort, they like what they do. They really don't want to completely stop working. They just want to start doing some other stuff.
Yeah. I mean, if I had two conversations today with folks who want to scale their business, but they say like, I love what I do. Like I want to do it. So yeah, it's a very common thing.
So people enjoy what they're doing. So the thing is, they have to be thinking about, at some point, I want to be able to afford to stop working. Because if I can afford to stop working, my options are much larger.
Sure. Yeah.
You don't want to be 65 years old and have no money in the bank.
Yeah. I mean, that's, and that's the fear of most entrepreneurs, right? As they're struggling through the cash flow, they're like, right now, most people who have what I call a six-figure practice, they're paying the bills. They're
Yep.
certainly not financially free, like in any
No.
way, shape, or form. There's no concept of freedom about it, and it starts to get to a place where they're working so hard to sort of tread water at this like things are okay standpoint that there's really fear of backing off. It's like I got to keep the treadmill going at this rate of speed, otherwise everything's going to fall apart. And that's like a big fear.
Well, I know one of the things that you talk to your folks about is their pricing model.
Yeah, right.
And what I find with consultants most of the time who are, say $100,000 to $200,000 in revenue, they think they have 2,000 hours a year to sell.
Right.
So they price their services based on 2,000 hours when they really have 600 or 800 hours.
Right.
So
That is really true. I think a lot of people way overestimate how much time actually work, billable time. Not that I like pricing that way, but it's a good way to think about it. It's
you still need to
there's
think
not that
about
much time.
You still think whether you're billing by the hour or project rate. I mean, I agree with you. You should never bill by the hour, and I can go into a whole bunch of reasons why you shouldn't do that.
Sure.
I'm sure you do that with other people, but
but
the truth is, when you do need to look at what your hourly utilization is.
That's a really good way to phrase that metric. Yeah.
So if I'm charging somebody a $5,000 project fee, if it was me doing that, I would say that needs to be no more than 10 hours of my time.
Yeah.
And I typically would do it in 7 hours, which is why I like project fees.
Sure.
So I'm saying is I need to have it for my business to be successful. My utilization, which means the time I'm actually working with clients, not the time I'm working in the business, but the time I'm working with my clients, has to create at least $500 an hour.
That is a really interesting threshold that I bet a lot of people are listening going, what? I'm charging $25 an hour or $30 an hour or $50 an hour, or even people who are, my time's worth $100 an hour, $200 an hour. That's, it's going to blow their minds. How do they move to that spot?
Well, you create enough value for your clients that you do that, and you work with a client that's got a big enough checkbook that they can afford to pay you.
Yeah. As one of our mutual friends likes to say, Francine Graglia, but she says, stop selling to broke people.
Right. Right. I when people say to me, well, okay, if I go through my whole litany of who should hire me, one of the things I say, people say, you need to make $500,000 a year before you hire me.
Yeah.
And the reason is that if you make $100,000 a year, you are not going to write me a check for $60,000.
No, for sure not.
I mean, you're just not going to.
And even if you promised a $1.2 million value proposition out of it, you're still not going to write a check.
I'm just still not going to write the check to you because they just can't imagine that happening.
Right. The other thing that's interesting is I do find that folks who aren't further along, your clients who are not further along in their own ability to generate business, right? They look at pricing in a very different way. So I found that if people are earning less, the more they're struggling on the day-to-day, the less likely they are to see the return on investment and instead reverse calculate the hourly rate. In other words, they'll go, wait a minute, I'm kind of paying you like $500, $800 an hour. That's crazy. I would never charge $800 an hour. So I don't care what the thing is here. I'm not going to, but people who, have a little bit more experience in business and are earning more, they're more familiar with this return on investment framework for understanding, when they're going to buy something.
Yeah. Well, the other issue that I do is I like to start off with a project with somebody. Say going into my monthly fee is $5,000 a month. That's what I charge.
Mm-hmm.
But no one's going to pay me that out of the box. They have to do something with me first,
right?
So I can prove my value. And I have 4 programs that I bring into the first thing that we do with folks, and all of them have a guarantee. If I don't get the result that we talk about, I mean, not the implementation, but
Yeah.
what needs to be done, because I can't control whether you're going to do it or not, but I can
Right.
control whether we come up with a strategy that would get you a result that's operationally doable.
Yeah, that makes sense. Right.
If I come up with a strategy, if I can't come up with a strategy that's operationally doable, you don't pay me.
Yeah.
Now that puts the pressure on me to be more careful about who I accept as a client.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
So as a result, I've developed this thing we call the alignment conversation, which very simply is where are you now? Where do you want to be 3 to 5 years from now?
Yeah.
What's the gap between those two? And if you had that gap, what would the value be? If that gap was filled, what would the value be for you?
Yeah.
And then we can say, is it worth, I can say, is it worth for me to do the work? And is it likely for me to be able to do it and get a success?
Right.
And number two, you can decide whether it's enough. And then I use another mutual friend of ours, Michael Port's really, really complicated close. Are you ready for this?
Yes.
Would you like some help?
I know that is such a great question. And because I've, you and I both have taught Michael's stuff before.
Yes.
So, when I mentioned that to people, they're like, wait, let me write that down. What was that again? That's just too simple.
Well, well, there's a second part to that is, would you like some help? And then the second part is, would you like me to help you?
Would you like it to be me? Yeah. That's right.
You have to do the second part. If you don't do the second part,
of course.
Well, I always have to say that because people they'll stop at, would you like some help? And you say, oh yeah, I'd like some help. And you walk away and they say, well, maybe it's not me.
Right. But the idea is that it comes down to, this isn't about closing techniques. This is, have you aligned? I like how you call it an alignment conversation. Have you aligned with the thing that the problem they're actually trying to solve, the job they need to get done, however you want to describe it. And then it comes down to, well, do you want some help with that or not? It's a really disarmingly friendly way to get to the finality of that part of the conversation.
And by the way, in that conversation, I haven't said a word about how we work until they say, I want me to help them.
Yeah.
Then I tell them about our company and I tell them about our fee structure and all the other stuff that goes along with it.
Yeah, sure.
But I don't ever get into that. Most people lead with that crap.
Oh, completely. Yeah. I think one of the biggest problems in like B2B consulting, B2B service providers is that, we have a process and sort of fall in love with our process and so we want to share it with everybody,
Yeah. So that's, essentially the way it works. So
yeah, that's great. It's a great point. And the thing I like about you talking about pricing is going back to the 80-20 rule that you talked about. What I have seen is that adjusting your pricing is the best thing you can do to get more leverage out of that 80-20 split, because that 80-20 split's going to look different for everybody based on kind of where you are. But if you want to get better leverage from that 20% of your best clients, the best thing you can do is raise prices and then focus on the 20% who are going to be willing to pay that price for you. And there may be folks in the 80% that, you may be doing other work or whatever, and they may even fall off the back of the truck as you continue on down the road. But you're focusing on the folks who understand the value proposition and are willing to compensate you for it.
Yeah, the thing here's something that also gives an opportunity for folks who are in this world is that when you do the 80-20, you should always 80-20 your clients to find out who your best clients are.
Yeah, that's a great
Then
strategy.
You need to be looking at all those clients and say, what do they all have in common, the 20%. And then only sell to that group. Stop doing one-offs. Start doing the same thing, wash, rinse, repeat. Right. And if I'm in a niche, I don't have to learn all over again. And although I might be charging somebody $5,000 and say it's going to take me 10 hours, the reality is it's going to take me 3 hours.
Right. Because it's the thing you're really, really good at.
I can do it in my sleep.
Yeah. Right.
That's the whole thing. If you could do stuff in your sleep, you don't have to spend a lot of time. I mean, the thing is, my alignment conversation generally goes for an hour and a half. I couldn't tell you in the first 10 minutes of that conversation whether I'm going to be able to create value or not.
Yeah.
Because, it's either going to be in my wheelhouse or it's not going to be in my wheelhouse.
Right.
And if it's not my wheelhouse, I really don't want to do it because I'm not into one-offs.
Yep. Right. Yeah. I love the whole avoid the one-off thing. Because again, service providers, we get into this mindset of like, I got to close the deal. Like I got to get the money in from somewhere, with this idea that, if I turn this job down, there isn't another one around the corner.
Yeah.
And so we end up, think of all the problems that happen in service businesses when we do this. Like we get the scoping wrong because we don't really know what we're doing. We've never done it before. We have a hard time explaining it. We fumble around. We have trouble with delivery. All of these things that can be completely avoided if you're just, that's like I tell people, you're not Burger King. You don't get it your way. That's not the way it works here.
Yeah, I tell people you need to be a nicheaholic.
Oh, a what?
A nicheaholic.
A nicheaholic. That's great.
Yeah. So, awesome. I introduce I'll go to meetings all the time and say, "Hi, I'm Josh. I'm a nicheaholic."
Nicheaholic. Hi, Josh. That's awesome. All right. Really, last go. We're running out of time, so I apologize because we would talk forever, and
yes.
we're going to have, unfortunately, the clock separate us from this dinner. But what's one thing is people are listening, and again, let's focus on the service business owners who are kind of maxed out. They're in that $200,000 to $400,000 range, and they've run out of time. They can't see how to grow. What's like one thing they can do tomorrow that would really change the trajectory of getting to this financial freedom conversation?
Raise your prices by 30%.
I love it. That's great.
I mean, first of all, if you're so busy, you don't have time, you need to lose a couple of clients.
Yeah, that's a good point.
If I raise my prices 30 to 50%, if I raise my prices 50%, I can lose 50% of my clients and still stay where I was with revenue.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, people tell me that all the time. I'll say something crazy like, "Why don't you double your prices?" And they'll go, "Oh, are you kidding? I'd lose like 30% of my clients." And I'm like, "Okay, sure, but you just doubled your prices. You lose 30% of your clients. You're actually ahead, and you have more time left for yourself." Like, oh, I never thought about it that way.
Yeah, I mean,
I always say that, like, anytime I come up to a restaurant where there's a 2-hour wait, I'm like, we have a pricing problem on the menu. I know that's a horrible thing to say.
I was talking.
That's great advice.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day, and they said that they're selling 100% of the people they're talking to, and he said, "Well, that tells me I need to raise my prices."
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
If you're not getting no's for 10 to 20% of the time because you're too expensive, then you're not priced properly.
Yeah, actually, yeah. When we teach people how to do validation calls, we want there to be messaging alignment 5 out of 7 times, but we only want there to be pricing alignment 3 or 4 out of 7 times. Because if all 7 people say, "Yeah, that's a great price," then you're priced too low.
Yeah,
there's no way you're priced correctly then.
And almost every professional service provider, especially coaches, are priced ridiculously too low.
Oh yeah, that's.
And they tell me, "Well, I want to serve this population." I said, "Well, do that on a pro bono basis with a few, not with everybody."
Yeah.
Exactly. I've got 4 or 5 people I work with on a pro bono basis because I like what they're doing.
Yeah.
Now I can afford to do that because of all the other stuff I do, and I charge high prices for everything else.
Yeah. Be a philanthropist later after you've actually earned some money yourself.
Yes.
There's plenty of time for philanthropy when you've earned the money. Josh, this has been great. I really enjoy you. I love talking to you. It's a lot of fun.
Same with me. I love talking with you also, Frank.
Yeah. And the really fun part of the conversation happened offline, so the podcast listeners don't get that. Too bad for them. That was actually a lot of good conversation. One last question for you before we let you go. People want to connect with you, figure out more about what you do. What's a great place for them to start?
Well, I'll give you the 2 things to do. One is we have a quiz, which is we'll tell you in about 7 or 8 minutes whether you're on the road to financial freedom or not, and most people aren't. And it's called the 4 Boxes of Financial Independence. And to get it's really easy. You just go to thecashflowcode.com. That's thecashflowcode.com. You click on the big orange button and you take the quiz.
Great. And so we've got that link in the show notes. So come to the show notes under the video, you can click on through.
And the other thing you could do is you could call me or you could just send me an email at jpatrick@stage2planning.com. That's
Okay.
the number 2.
Great.
jpatrick@stage2planning.com. I'm email obsessed. I generally get back to people within hours. If not hours, it's definitely within a day.
Yeah.
So,
You're really good at follow-up. That is something I know about you. You're like on email, you're really good about follow-up. If I forget something, if I tell you I'm going to do something and I forget, you will remind me.
I have that annoying, again, that's my training for how to be a good delegator.
That's great. That's great. That's perfect. Josh, thanks so much. We've got those links there. So again, they're below the video. If you're watching the video, they were on the show notes page. If you're out and about listening to the audio, come on back to the show notes page and click through to take the quiz and to get a little better understanding of Josh and what they're up to. Josh, thanks so much for spending time with us today. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks so much, Frank.
And thank you for being with us on the 6 to 7 Figure Show. I've been your host, Frank Bria. Just a quick reminder, if you want to talk about getting your business past the 7-figure mark, send me a text, HTP, to 602-698-7575. We'll come up with a plan together. That code is HTP to the number 602-698-7575. That is my direct line. And I will get back with you. We'll see you on the next episode of the 6 to 7 Figure Show.